like set of games today. I wanted to start off today with the classical Karo Khan. I think I'll give people a moment or two to just come in, but yeah, the classical Karo Khan is a pretty interesting opening. It's a it's basically sort of harder to define sometimes than other classical Karo Khans. It can involve both Ponte. It can involve both the Tarash, which I think can transpose into a classical Karo-Khan after Pawn takes e4. But I think basically it's kind of solidified by. Hey, good morning, Tarash. Thank you. You've probably seen this one before. I think I've worn this one on the stream once or twice before, but I guess in a month or two that happens. But yeah, thank you, Tarash. Appreciate it. Good morning. But yeah, so the classical Karo Khan, basically classical variation, involves this early trade on e4. This is the line that I know well. This is the one that I always show, and thank you, thanks Tarash. But yeah, so here I guess what I would say about the classical Karo Khan is. It's the one that I always talk about, where basically the bishop plays to d3, and then the bishop takes on d3, and then the queen takes d3 on move 10. Hey, good morning, Spark. Good morning, FIFA boy. Nice to see you guys. So classical Karo Khan involves the taking on e4. Knight c3 or knight d2. Usually knight c3 is the main line. And this is the one that I always pick up and say, this is the classical Karo Khan. This is basically the this is what I always say. This is the line that I say. I'm not big on memorizing opening lines, but the queen takes d3 in the classical Karo Khan I figure is one of those opening lines where bishop takes d3, queen takes d3, and things are good. Cool. Yeah. Good stuff, FIFA boy. Are your classes done? Yes. Classical Karo Khan is a low difficulty opening to play. Completely agree. Basically, Tarash came up with actually a really cool, idea in the classical Karo Khan, or he showed a very cool, hey, thank you very much. Thank you for the follow, Sleepy. Thank you very much for joining the stream, and, yeah, thanks for being here. But yeah, so the ideas are, if it's a, cool. Yeah, it works well. One of the interesting things about this classical Karo Khan is now that I think about it, I probably should have pulled up that early I should have pulled up one of the games that you sent, Tarash, to be honest. But one of the things about the classical Karo Khan is that it has this h6 point, which can actually provide, down the road, maybe 5 or 10 moves, a pretty good way of attacking the black king side. Basically, black will double the g. Black can potentially double the g pawns, and then this h6 pawn provides a hook in order to basically attack the h6 pawn and the castled king. So black plays e6 and then bishop to d6, which is a pretty common plan in the classical Karo Khan, and then doubles. Hey, good morning, Aphelion. Thank you very much for joining the stream. Yeah, so Tarash's plan here, I actually really like. That's a cool kind of pre-made plan if you're interested. I should have pulled up one of the games that he sent on this topic, but something like bishop d2, castles queenside, and things are good. E6, bishop d2, bishop d6, castles queenside, bishop takes g3. I'm probably butchering it. Tarash's idea is more precise than what I'm saying, but basically Tarash's idea involves this bishop takes g3, and then pushing g4, g5 against the ideally a post-castled king, and using this h6 as a hook to break in with g4, g5, pawn takes h6. It was cool. It was a kind of novel plan that I'd never seen before. I hadn't really considered the idea of freely trading off that g4, g5. Cool. Yeah, no problem, FIFA boy. Thank you very much for being here. And thanks, Pixon. Good to see you. A lot of the classical gang is here, which is great. But yeah, so bishop takes g3, g4, g5 is a plan that works well for white against this black king side. And basically, I think this is good. And by the way, just in case anyone's looking, Tarash is actually explaining an idea which he showed off in this. There was a specific opening line that Tarash had in mind in the classical Caro-Kann. You can read a good write-up of what Tarash is saying just on the stream comments. I think we've spent some time looking at this, and what Tarash is saying is actually I mean, it's not surprising, but what Tarash is saying is very accurate and well researched. So if you look at his comments here, they really do explain well a good plan for white in the classical Caro-Kann. But this main idea of this plan involves this sacrifice or trade of this knight on g3, doubling the pawns on the g file, and pushing g4, g5. But it's really the thoughts that Tarash is expressing are well researched and could potentially be helpful. I should have pulled up one of his games because he did a great demonstration about this 2-3 weeks ago. Yeah, so the classical Caro-Kann, this is one of the few move orders that I really suggest memorizing as white, because I think they explain a lot in terms of playing this opening as white. But yeah, if you get it quickly, we can show it. Good, Smiggy. Thank you all very much for being here. Yeah, sure. If you post the link, I'll give 5 minutes to it for sure. But it shows a great plan for white in the classical Caro-Kann. Really gonna spend the time on the memorization here. Pawn takes e4, knight takes e4, bishop f5, knight g3, bishop g6. h4 and h5 are key moves here. Getting h5 in is helpful because it both threatens the bishop and knocks it to h7, which is sort of necessary, and also limits the mobility of the h6 pawn and the g7 pawn. Cool. Yeah, sure. Definitely send it, Smig, and we will definitely be. We can add it to the list of games to play. Thank you very much for sending the game over. But yeah, so h4 going up against h6, h5 is playable, knocking the bishop to h7, and bishop to d3 is played on move 9. Queen takes d3 is played on move 10. So just to go through this again. Knight f3, knight d7, h5, bishop h7, bishop d3, queen takes d3, queen takes d3. You'll know you've played the classical Caro-Kann correctly if you take with the queen on move 10. This is a well-established response to the classical Caro-Kann. And then there's a few different novel ideas. Black generally tends to castle kingside here. Black can also sometimes castle queenside, but castling kingside is more common. White's going to do kind of standard developing moves. The bishop's going to go to d2. White should probably castle queenside, and then maybe exert pressure on the e6 pawn with a rook. Basically get a half open file for the rook on the e file. Yeah, I mean it's pretty interesting. There's a number of plans here. You can sometimes play c4. That c4 can be good. And knight e4 can also be good, and knight f5 potentially can be good. I've played knight f5 in a few different games where basically the rook is on the e file and pinned against this king. Knight f5 played against f6 and a pre-castled king can sometimes lead to some interesting and aggressive positions for white. There are some lines where there's c4 and bishop d2. I guess I do want to show Tarash's game if he can find it in the next minute or two. But there's a few different lines here. Tarash has a great novel idea. We saw this a week or two ago. I thought it was great. But the main lines here are bishop d2, bishop to f4, and yeah, this bishop to d2 line is a pretty common response. Plans coming with castling queenside, rook to e1. Knight gf6, castles queenside, bishop e7, king b1, and I'm just sort of playing through the main lines here, but it's basically going to be the establishment of an attack on the black king side. Here, this all sort of makes sense. c4 or c3, and here basically this is a position that's I think slightly favorable for white. This doubled pawn structure is not particularly good for black. But this is the standard mainline relative equality. I think f4, g4, g5, pawn takes g5. Leaves a pretty good position for white here. Bishop e3, yeah, is the straightforward developing move. And now we're in the kind of mainline classical Caro-Kann. It's relatively equals. White has a slight initiative and a better pawn structure. But it really will come down to White's ability to play the late middle game correctly in order to win this game. Attacking ideas come with f4, g4, g5. Maybe there's a chance to get a free pawn. Basically free the h pawn potentially. You can get a good attack on the h6 hook again. But yeah. Overall, this is the classical Caro-Kann, very recognizable. I'll go through another main line, but I really just want to, I'm really shooting to have everyone kind of memorize this. It can also occur, by the way. I'll just play it out of the Tarrasch this time. Pawn takes e4, knight d5, and this is exactly the same as if the knight had played knight c3 on the first move or second move. So yeah, bishop h7, bishop d3, bishop takes, queen takes. And you'll know you've done it correctly if the queen takes d3 on move 10. This is the theory that it's a memorizable series of moves. This is the Caro-Kann classical, and I think you can sort of just do it as a you can. This is not an unmemorizable series of moves. This is the classical Caro-Kann. It comes up a lot in the opening book. There's almost 10,000 games out of it. So e6, bishop d2, knight gf6, castles queenside, and overall I think White's got a pretty solid position here. Moves like bishop e7, queen c7, bishop d6. With the early bishop d6, I'll try to do it by hand, but basically this bishop takes g3, f takes g3 is something that offers White potential to attack, and then to use this h6 as an attacking hook. Just a simple idea, very straightforward way to play it. I don't know. I guess in this position, maybe rook to h4 to support g4. But Tarrasch, has sent a very good game previously on this topic. Probably available, maybe available. I don't know. It was a few weeks ago. But this serves as a pretty cool pre-made attack for White, with g4, g5, and threats on h6 and f6. Really pretty dangerous. But yeah. So anyways, this is pretty good. This is a plan for White. One of the many plans White can do to kind of aggressively break through the black king side. So yeah, so this classical can come through. Yeah, if you send one quickly, we'll close. We can close this analysis on it, Tarrasch. Cool. Yeah. No. It is worth looking at for sure. I think it's interesting. We can go through kind of the main themes. The main themes, can be basically aggressive White attacks after castling queenside. So basically, castle queenside for White, and then make an aggressive attack on the black king side. This is the exact move order that I was looking for. So this is a classical Caro-Kann. It's a little bit of a transposition because of this early e6 move as opposed to knight d7, but still the classical Caro-Kann. Queen takes on d3, so White's structure is identical. Bishop d2, bishop takes g3. And this attack of this g pawn on this h6 hook is going to get totally overwhelming very quickly. This is So this is actually a pre-castling version of it. Having this open rook, this is a demonstration of the open rook file pushing on the pushing on an uncastled king, also very strong and worth the full exchange sacrifice here. Rook takes f7, and black is pretty much already in kind of mating trouble, basically. Really dangerous. So yeah, black resigns on move 19. This is a very busting attack for White, and just one of the the themes that White can have on this classical Caro-Kann. Very dangerous threats on the king side and on move 7. There's another game that Tarrasch, and where basically it's post castling. I guess I got another minute, so we'll do this one super quickly, demonstrating the main themes. Tarash has actually put in a lot of the diligent work on researching this, so I really do defer to his judgment on these kind of kingside attacks with double G pawns. What he's said on this topic is accurate, and we went through this a few weeks ago. But super interesting stuff, and you know, it's awesome. It's one of those situations where he's done the research, so we can all benefit from it. It's very strong, and you know, listen to him on this topic. He knows his classical Caro-Kann. This is the Pawn Storm version, basically the same concept with this doubled pawn on G3. I've actually been working to incorporate this research into my games. Really good ideas. But basically, this is the post-castling hook, or post-castling hook on H6. Why will Black take on G3? Good question. You know, Black obviously, you know, Black doesn't need to take on G3, but I think Black will see, you know, especially pre-castling, pre-white castling, Black will see the opportunity to disrupt some of the characteristics of White's kingside castling, and here, you know, it's very tempting for Black to trade this pawn for G3. You know, at first glance, this looks like a pretty bad pawn structure for White, so this is a pretty tempting thing for Black to do. Bishop takes G3, pawns doubled on G3. It disrupts, you know, basically, you know, White's pawn structure on the king side, and makes, you know, potentially a post-kingside castled king. But the structure is actually very strong. So, you know, it's not a forced thing for Black to do, but it is something that Black might do if he's unfamiliar with White's ability to attack and the strength of this structure. This structure here, this G3, G2, and H5, is surprisingly strong and can very successfully launch an attack on this H6 hook, especially post-castling. So basically, Black, you know, it's not forced, but it's something that's very appealing to Black because it's a very easy pawn structure to misunderstand the strength of. Rook F1, castles, Knight E5. I don't know in terms of this game, you know, whether it's a great idea to, no, you're right, and it's not forced for Black, but it is a very tempting prospect, and you know, it's a potential idea. You know, if it's not something that Black plays immediately, you can work around it. There's no downside to just castling queenside here and, you know, allowing this to be taken. But basically, the main point is if it's tempting for Black and not something that Black should take, and then it's not something that that White should be afraid to. It's not something that White should be afraid to have in his game. So allowing this doubling, you know, allowing this D6 bishop to be traded for this G3 knight is not something that you know, is basically not something that White should be worried about Black playing, is the main point. And then if it happens, it offers a pre-made attack, which Tarash has explained, you know, pretty, you know, so Tarash has explained well. Tarash has done the research on this more than I have, so what he's saying, you know, I think is a pretty good guiding general concept. But interesting stuff. Classical Caro-Kann allows for attacks on the king side, and those are two demonstrated games where this double G pawn can really cause Black some issues on the king side. Anyways, very interesting stuff. I want to move on to Julia's game. Julia sent this game, and I will take a look at it. But yeah, there's some really interesting research in the Caro-Kann. I mean, you know, in 15 minutes, I can't, you know, I'm, you know, really just sort of scratching the surface. But it gives a good kind of generalized attacking idea for White. And yeah, you know, I appreciate Tarash spending the time doing the research on this one. Yeah, it's awesome. It's great. You went, you know, the game's, what he's saying really is correct. We went over this at, you know, at more length maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. But he's done the research on this one, and I think we can all kind of benefit from that. So I think it's awesome. Thank you for sharing those games, Tarash, and thank you for putting basically adding a lot to that demonstration. It's a very good plan for White, very interesting, and something that I probably will incorporate into my games. Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome, RV Phil. Welcome, Kiro. Thank you very much for being here. But yeah, so this is Julio's game. It's a Sicilian game, very early Smith-Morra Gambit. Julio plays the Smith-Morra Gambit. It's definitely an interesting opening. Good at, you know, I think best as a surprise attack, but a very playable opening that, will give white practical compensation for relative equality. Yeah. Cool. Smith Mora, awesome. A6 is a pretty unchallenging response, so white can regain the initiative pretty easily with developing moves. So yeah, so I would think a knight f3, e6, bishop c4. Bishop c4 is a little bit unusual as a main line here. You know, we've talked a little bit about the value of bishop c4 being higher post e5. You know, with bishop c4 facing into e6 can be a bit tricky. But overall, I think, you know, white's in pretty good place, and you know, white has a big developmental advantage. One of the freeing things about the Smith-Morra Gambit, to be honest, I mean, basically in the Smith-Morra Gambit, white gets quick development, especially of the queenside knight. You know, what's a little bit interesting is facing off this bishop into the e6, f7. But what if black chooses to defend bishop h7 by knight f6? Take bishop takes h7. Whatever, you know, basically the bishop, you know, I think you're talking about the classical Caro-Kann noes. But yeah, take the bishop on h7. Whatever piece is going to end up on h7 is going to be displaced on h7. So I would suggest taking it. I don't want to say that as an absolute, but that's a good general concept. I would look through an opening book to see the value of bishop takes h7, just to be sure that that's the correct idea. But I think that's the correct idea in most situations. Certainly, if the knight plays to f6 to defend the bishop on h7, it's a little less clear. If the rook is the only piece defending the bishop on h7, then definitely play bishop takes h7, displacing the rook to h7, and breaking up black's castling position. That's my thinking on that, Noise. I don't know the knight f6 defensive move as well as I know the rook takes h7 defensive move, but I'm pretty sure that's right. I would take a look at an opening database to confirm, but I think that's the answer to that question. Yeah. So anyways, Smith-Morra Gambit, super fast development for white. I guess this is probably a little bit better for black. You know, white has sacrificed a full pawn for this development. But, you know, that's how it is with gambit openings. It's, you know, you're basically using practical compensation and quick development to get a quick win against your opponent. Kind of a classical play. Here, I think, I don't know, I would be tempted to double the pawns on the e-file. Like, I'd be tempted to play knight takes, or bishop takes c5, maybe. Maybe knight takes e5, bishop to e3. But anyways, you can just sort of sidestep it with bishop a2. That's fine for white as well. These rooks are good here. But you know, white has better piece play here. His bishops are in better places. These bishops are relatively undeveloped. So here, you know, the question is whether white's better piece play and strong rook on c1 is enough to set up a, you know, is basically enough to set up a win. Hey Julio, hey, this is your game. Yeah, Julio, if you have anything you'd like to take a look at in terms of this game, please let me know. We can go through it. Yeah, no. I was just looking at Kiro's comment. I mean, Kiro's in a good place. I think Kiro's a good player. You know, Kiro basically, I think with tactical study, Kiro will see great returns on tactical study. You know, he got a significant positive position against me. But I would steer you towards tactics, Kiro. I think you are getting these great positions against highly ranked players, but you know, converting a middle game advantage is is where it's at there. You've clearly played the opening correctly to get these big middle game advantages, and with tactical study and good tactical vision in the middle game, you should be able to close those out pretty well. I think you're on a good path, Kiro. To be completely honest, you know, we played a few games. You got a winning position in one. Yeah, endings too maybe. Endings too might help, but. I'm saying if you have a +6 position with tactical study, I think you should be able to win those. Yeah, no, I think it's the way to go. You know, up until expert level, I think the value of studying tactics is extremely high. It's not something you can teach. It's just something that you have to practice and do. I compare it to weightlifting. I think if you weightlifting or fitness type things, like you just have to do it. There's no shortcuts, and eventually you will be much stronger from having done tactical study. But Kiro's getting good positions. Kiro specifically got a +8 position or something against me. Basically in the late middle game, I was able to get some good opportunities. I think Kiro's on a great path that would really benefit from a lot of tactical study. End games too, maybe. But that would be my recommendation there. But yeah, this is Julio's game, so I want to make sure. Any errors so far? Not really. I mean, the thing is, I think Smith Mora Gambit is good to play 25% of the time, or something like that. It's a Gambit opening. It's just that much. I understand it because I've played openings like this in my own point. For myself at some point. Like I used to play the Danish Gambit at some points. I used to play Evans at some points. And one of the things is it's just objectively not that strong. It's a great surprise weapon, but I think as a general policy, I would at least look at other openings. Consider make your opening set a little bit more diverse. Smith Mora very well, and I think that's really valuable. But I think that you want to try to make your opening strategy. I think basing your opening repertoire on a single gambit is a rough way to play. I think you need to diversify a little. Smith Mora Gambit is great for 25 to 50% of your games, maybe, if it's what you really like to play and what you're really familiar with. But the issue is that you just objectively speaking, these days, C takes D4 and black has equalized more or less. After basically mainline Smith Mora, black equalizes or shows slightly better after the knight taking. You have great practical comp and great you have great practical comp and great development as white. You're going to have a good rook file. It's going to be a really interesting game, and if you're familiar with it, it can be extremely dangerous for white. But in general, it's hard to look at a position in which black is -4 or -0.4 on move 4 and feel like that's that strong an opening. I mean, it's just the classical openings have just been sort of antiquated. They're great. They're great surprise weapons, super cool, and great to trap your opponent, a couple times with. But it's just objectively not that strong. I don't think grandmasters will play this as white anymore. So you're sort of you have great practical comp, but are sort of playing from behind, in games where you play this. This all seems good. I know this is relatively mainline stuff for Smith Mora Gambit. A6 is a little bit unusual. A4 I think is a good counter to A6. But yeah, so bishop. This is all like within an opening book. I think you're basically fine. The issue is you're just carrying this this initiative for black from this point. So like let's take a look at like move 4. After move 4, this equilibrates to about -0.4, and if you just go forward on it, it stays at about -0.4 or -0.8, and it's just you're playing from behind every game. It's just a tough way to, it's a really great surprise attack, but it's just a tough way to play in general. Yeah, so I mean, no, I don't think you've made any mistakes. I think you've basically played to equality from an opening position that objectively provides black with good compensation. You're playing from a pawn down. Basically from here, you've played to equal after move 15. You're basically exactly where you were in terms of eval on move 15 as you were on move 4. So no errors, I don't think, but just a tough opening to really play. I think yeah, let's see. I mean, let's keep going. I think you've got a good position. I think you've got good piece play, but you're a pawn down. Okay, so I think there's maybe some tactical opportunities here. Knight to d4 is an idea that basically blocks off this open file. Black has sort of moved towards an open file here, and knight d4, effectively blocks that off. It's let's keep looking. Knight f4, knight takes e6. I think this might not be the best idea. I think knight takes e6 is a good piece sacrifice, or, is a piece sacrifice, but with king, basically the bishop is defended, so I think tactically speaking, it's a little rough. Let's keep looking. No, I think you're playing pretty well. It's a tough way to play. I think this is the high point for white. Here, I'll just run the report. E5 is interesting. So here, basically, bishop c4, which is a main line in the Smith-Morra gambit, runs into this e6 pawn. Yeah, e5. E5 I think is fine. I think this is good. It's a little bit of an expansion in the king side, or in the center. You play e5 and the knight has to move, and then black will play either d6 or f6 to trade off the pawn, and then your center is gonna be kind of neutralized. Let's look at this. Yeah, maybe bishop takes e5. Yeah, this is tricky. So knight d4 is better than bishop to c3 here. Challenging black on this open file is kind of a is a valuable thing to do. You're gonna have to be careful with this knight, but at any point you can trade it off for the bishop on c6, so there's some value in that. The issue is, I think that basically, if you were to take a look at this from black's position, like what are black's main ideas here, or what are the values in his position? This bishop is on a fianchetto, so that's pretty solid. This open file, I think, is black's biggest advantage over white at this point. I mean, basically, black has a full open file, and I don't want to be too. I think it's a great surprise weapon, the Smith-Morra. Like, I think it can really offer white quick development against an unprepared opponent. My memory is that it has some traps, although I don't know them super well. And overall, it will offer white quick development. But I think at this point, it's a very classical opening, an early gambit for attacking chances. And I think black can just sort of not react to white's most, basically can play in a relatively calm way and just end up a pawn up. So that's where I would point. That's what I would point towards. I don't know that line super well, Tarash, but I bet you're correct. You've done a lot of opening study. Tarash is probably master level at openings. Just for anyone watching the stream, he's shown me some things that have been very helpful. When it comes to opening theory, looking at Tarash's ideas, I think that's definitely pretty solid. Yeah, it's just tough when black has a major advantage by move 4. I mean, here, black is down over a pawn, or black is up over a pawn. Bishop to c3, I think, is not that. I think bishop to c3 is an error. We were taking that position from black's perspective. I think basically the best idea here is knight to d4. Knight to d4 challenges one of black's most, basically one of black's biggest strengths. This pressure and this open file. Knight to d4 actually blocks this file surprisingly efficiently. This knight to d4 move is holding this file so that black can't really advance on it. Black will eventually challenge this knight on d4, probably with undermining things like f6, and then with things like f6 here. But at any point when the bishop gets challenged, the knight can just play knight takes c6 and then pawn takes c6, and it gives back the file, but it's been temporarily blocking for black for a few moves. Looking more at this, I think by this point, black can exploit this open file. This is a good tactic, threatening mate and threatening to win this b3 pawn. This b3 pawn is won, and black is better. Black's turned his advantage into a material advantage. It's just rough. I mean, honestly, it's just, I guess I would check out, I'm going to take a look at the Wikipedia on the Smith-Morra Gambit, but I think that grandmasters will give pretty good assessments of why Smith-Morra is a very difficult opening to play. It's uncommon at grandmaster play. So like I'm actually just searching on Google right now. I'm trying to see like grandmasters on Smith-Morra Gambit. Let's see. Smith-Morra Gambit refutation. Yeah, I mean, I guess I would just say, it's just tough when you're looking at the eval and it's a minus 0.4 on move 4 or whatever. It's just a tough way to play. White should be at a +4 at that point. White starts off with an initiative, and if black is showing such a good eval, then I think you're basically, good. I would play the Smith-Morra Gambit as black whenever. But yeah. Cool. Yeah. Send a link, Julio. If you do a free lessons stream, I guess I can send it to you. I really want to encourage other people with free lesson streams. So if you stream on Friday, I can send it to you. Just keep everything appropriate and appropriate for people of all ages, and I'm happy to send you I'm happy to raid your stream or whatever. Yeah, no, I think Tarash is a master in opening knowledge. But yeah, free lesson stream, definitely. If anyone has free lesson streams, ideally, I was trying to think of, I was hoping for people expert level or higher. But free lesson streams, I will be happy to raid. Just an open offer for anyone who's interested. But yeah. Anyways, on to the next game. Julio, I think basically Smith-Morra Gambit's a really tough game to play. It's tough when it's just objectively, the computer has posts an objective advantage very early. In terms of errors here, I think there was a slight improvement in efficiency with knight to d5 playing against the open file. Bishop c3 basically gives black control of the open file, and it allows queen to d5. Knight to d4 both blocks this open file from a strategic perspective, and it tactically refutes the value of queen d5. Basically, when black plays queen d5 here, he's no longer threatening the b3 pawn. So the tactics here: bishop to c3 blocks this b3 pawn. Knight to d4, blocks the open file and defends the b3 pawn. This is a general improvement. I think is the biggest one, or is basically the biggest middle game improvement that could be. But I think that opening is just really tough to play. I would take a look at what the grandmasters look at there. Yeah. I don't know. Tarash has done some very master level opening things. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I've played Tarash before, but I probably have to play you Tarash to be completely confident in my assessment. Based on what you've shown, you have master level opening knowledge. I feel very comfortable. I feel very comfortable saying that you've got a master level opening knowledge. You've clearly put in some work on a lot of different openings, including ones that I don't know. I just would steer you away from that idea. It's just a really hard opening to play. Look, I mean, you've basically got this. You know, you're basically showing an eval of minus 0.4 on move 4. It's just tricky. This is not, you know, this objectively is not that good for white. So I would be inclined to steer you away from this in general. I think it's a great surprise attack. You know, there are many YouTube videos on how to win with it, the traps that are in there. But I think if black doesn't accept any of the traps, I think you're just in a rough place as white. You've basically given up a pawn for not too much compensation. Yeah, we should figure out a time to do that, Tarash. Feel free to post in the Discord, and I'll try to think of a time when it's good to play you. But yeah, cool. Here we go. This is a game played by Kathleen as black. Let's take a look. Sure. Yeah, we can do that. But yeah, so this is Kathleen playing as black against basically d5, d4, and then either knight d7 or d takes e4. This is an unusual way to play the Caro-Kann. When it comes to the Caro-Kann, I just want to look at the branches here. You know, d4 is probably an 85% choice, but basically here, knight f3 runs into an early d5, and I think the eval shifts pretty close to equality fairly early. Allowing e4, I think it's even... I mean, I don't even know what this opening is called, to be honest. Maybe it has a name. But d takes e4 is... yeah, this is rough. I don't think e4 is objectively very good for white. So I think here, you know, basically best move on this this response to the Caro-Kann is just to take the pawn. If you're getting a chance to take the pawn on e4 without knight on c3, you might as well. Even you know, even with the knight on c3, it's just the classical Caro-Kann. So pawn takes e4, I think is pretty good. Anyways, knight d7 here, I think is not as aggressive as pawn takes e4. This pawn really is gambited. You know, it's hard for white to get this pawn back. He probably can, but it's difficult. So like knight e5 and then knight to f6 or knight to d7, and you're holding this pawn on e4. Pawn takes, bishop b4, and then here basically black is relatively close to equality. You know, this is a Caro-Kann in which there's been a trade on d5. The rook can play to c8, and black should castle kingside. But you know, black is aiming for equality, you know, in most openings. So this is an early establishment of equality for black, and with normal development, things like bishop f5, knight f6, rook c8, black will be in a good place. So here, knight f6. I would play bishop f5 and then e6 here, but I guess it's, you know, there's a few different alternatives. But black is basically playing pretty well. I just want to look, just make sure. This is, yeah, so Kathleen is playing black, and basically gets good opportunities against the queen side here. Or gets good opportunities with the Caro-Kann here. Very bishop d7, bishop takes d7. To be honest, Tarash has a very good knowledge of good ideas in the classical Caro-Kann, and one or two other openings. So I don't know. I wouldn't want to generalize, giving Tarash too much credit. He's shown me a few things that I think are legitimately accurate for Tarash. So everybody be cool, and but I do think he has some very good good analysis of the classical Caro-Kann. Anyways, let's look at this. Pawn should take e4 here. Knight e4 is interesting. So the first improvement that I want to offer is this. This is a pretty just really tangible one. I think pawn takes e4 is the solidest idea. This is this basically is the best way that black can play. Maybe a6 could be, or h6 could be good. But this pawn is gambited, and the knight will play probably to e5. You defend with, or you can defend the knight with f6. So that's the first improvement. This e4 pawn is takeable for black, and objectively better than any other move here. So I would steer you towards that. I'm surprised that that's not played here. This is one of those situations where the opening theory is different than the is different than what's the engine is putting, but basically takes e4 is good. So yeah, continuing on this, that was an improvement. Here you're close to equality, so fine. Knight f3 is just not a good response to the Caro-Kann, to be honest. I think that's just objectively equalizing. And here there's a little bit of volatility, so let's study this this position for a second. Here knight takes f7 was the best move, which makes sense. I mean, knight takes f7 here. After castling, knight takes f7 wins a pawn. I don't see a better response here, because the queen has to be moved, or basically the rook has to take the knight, or the king has to take the knight. And then the d6 pawn, or the d6 bishop hangs. So I guess I would say, a takeaway from this is probably be careful with the bishop on d6, and be careful when it's not directly defended, particularly against a bishop from f4, but potentially against the knight on b5 or something like that. I guess the discovery characteristic, either queen or bishop along this this diagonal is probably the best situation for white to exploit that discovery. But be careful. Yeah, this is a two-move tactic that I've seen happen to people a bunch of times in my life. So knight takes f7 here was a better play for white, which means that there was an inaccuracy for black in allowing it. So I guess I would say here, hold off on castling. I don't know, maybe queen e7 here is a good idea. Probably queen e7 or queen c7. But something that for black that defends this bishop, because otherwise this knight takes f7 discovery is just gonna win a pawn and put white in give white an advantage. Queen d2, now black's slightly better. Trading off this knight makes sense. It's not objectively the best move. Objectively the best move was knight h5 threatening the bishop. But overall here with knight h5 threatening the bishop, the bishop has to either move to e3, in which case you can play bishop takes e5 and give white a pretty, a somewhat vulnerable pawn on e5, or if he plays to g5, you can fork. Or if he plays to g3, you can just take and kind of mangle black's pawn structure and trade off, the knight for another bishop, giving you a bishop pair to a knight pair, at least temporarily. Knight h5 here is objectively better. Bishop takes e5 is interesting. I'm not gonna. I think from a fundamental perspective, this is not. Bishop takes e5 is not a terrible move. It makes sense. The downside here, I think, is that in a relatively open position, you're trading off a bishop and eliminating a bishop pair. So yeah, I mean, I think big picture, Vertwitch, you're asking a good question. I think moves like queen e7 could be helpful. Long term, I think probably the best idea is to get this knight off the board first and then start advancing with your bishop. The engine proposes knight h5. I agree with that. I think basically if the knight goes to h5 and forces a trade for this bishop, that's something that's going to benefit black. It's just sort of, I guess I would just say it's sort of dangerous. precise play is going to be needed. Otherwise, black could end up in a position where he's, wasted tempo with the bishop. But yes, big picture, I think ideas like b5, b4, bishop b5, something like that could be a way forward, a way of kind of advancing black's position. But first, I would be careful to neutralize this attack. Knight h5 seems to be a really good way to neutralize white's center and to potentially get a bishop pair to a knight pair. That seems like a good plan. But yes, big picture for Twitch, I think advancing with the bishops is an idea. Maybe b5, b4, bishop b5, something like that. I think there can be threats on the queen side here. This is probably an opportunity for black to really make. So basically, black I think does best as a general plan by neutralizing the center and then advancing on the queen side with the pawn minority. But I think that's the best plan. That's what I would go with. Knight h5, bishop g5, f6. I think. Let's see. I think f6, right? Bishop g5, f6. Which looks a little bit tricky, but yeah, I think knight takes d7 becomes the best move. But forking these pieces is good. The knight trades for d7, and then none of the repositioning squares for the white bishop are that awesome. I'm guessing it's queen takes d7, bishop h4, g5. I think. Maybe that's too much. I don't know. But anyways, trading off that knight for that bishop is good. Trading off this knight for that bishop is not terrible. I mean, it was a well-posted knight for an underdeveloped bishop. I think black's main plans are going to be attacking along the queen side and then threatening on the c-pawn. Yeah, I mean, well, c2, yeah, is a weak pawn on an open file. E6, you're saying? Yeah, E6 is probably a potential target for white. But I don't think it's too easy. Yeah, I don't think it's too easy to advance on it. I think maybe king f7 could even be a defensive resource at some point. But black definitely has the pieces to defend against it. White also doesn't have the right minor piece to attack it. This bishop's never going to attack e6, and this knight would have to spend tons of moves to attack e6. So overall, I think in this position, knight h5, bishop g5, f6. And basically, black is in a good place. Black will take control of the semi-open c file, advance b5, and be in a good place. Very interesting. Bishop takes, knight to knight e4, and I think black's better here in a somewhat drawish opposite-colored bishop situation, but. Yeah, in terms of improvements, knight h5 is better than castling for sure. You don't want to allow this knight takes f7 tactic ever. It becomes available here. Just looking at knight takes f7. So say here castles, knight takes f7, bishop can't take f4 because the queen's not on d2 yet. Now. Knight takes f7 I think is actually less of a threat. I think on knight takes f7 you can play bishop takes f4 and threaten the queen and be in a good place. Anyways, black will basically continue on with this. White moves c3. And I think black can basically just play like rook c8. b4 looks like a pretty big inaccuracy for white. This gives an open pawn, a backward pawn on an open file, always a problem, or very often a problem. This c3 pawn looks very attackable. Rook c8, queen d7, queen c6, and yeah, looks like black is in a pretty solid position. Pawn takes, queen e3, f5. Black probably lets this get more open than he needs to. I mean, here, this c3 pawn is such a liability. I think you can go like king g6, rook h8, but leaving the g-pawn hanging and giving the bishop control of the e5 square is an error. So I think that's another thing that this is a kind of a strategic error to point to in this game. Bishop e5, allowing bishop e5 is problematic, and king g6 I think refutes it. Sorry, bishop e5 is problematic, and I think king g6 as opposed to f5 prevents it. So here, yeah, I would just sort of calmly play you know, relatively conservative moves. You can leave these pawns as is; they're solid as is. Moves like rook to c6, queen to d7, rook to c8, and black's in a pretty good place. F5 just provides too many vulnerabilities. I understand F5, you know, and the desire to play F4, but I think bishop to E5 can just, you know, after bishop to E5, F4, among other things, this queen H3 is available. So you never really have the opportunity to play F4 because bishop E5 is always going to be a refutation. The pawns are solid. There's not really much opportunity for white to get in here. It would take a long time, and black would set up a defense effectively and quickly. So here, just F5, F5, bishop E4, black is fine. Anyways, pretty good position for black. And I think this is actually what happened. So F5 is a tactical error, allowing bishop to E5. That is true. E3, okay, interesting. Surprised E3 is considered a mistake. E3 looks fine from my perspective. I mean, I guess maybe pawn takes F3 is better. I guess on pawn takes F3, you're setting up a situation in which you can really get into the white king side and make an established threat. I think rook F7, rook H7. Yeah, you're pretty much good. Yeah, so F4 I think is not the right play because it's too weakening. Or F5 is not the right play because it allows bishop to E5. But I think on F3, allowing, I mean, E3 makes sense. I mean, it's a connected passed pawn, so how bad could it be? I wouldn't, you know, I know E3 is not objectively the best move, but I understand the concepts behind it at least. You know, as an alternative to this, I think rook F7, pawn takes F3, pawn takes F3, rook F7 can be pretty dangerous. You know, with that, so say pawn takes F3, G takes F3, they're suggesting queen, okay, they are suggesting rook to F7. The engine was initially suggesting queen to D7 for a second there. But now you have sort of symmetrically open kingside structure, right? Hey, good morning, Matt Yop. Thank you very much for joining the stream. Looking forward to your game. Your game, Matt Yop, is in tomorrow's 10 a.m. stream. But yeah, so here I would say rook F7 is a better play. Rook F7 and then rook H7. I'm good. Yeah, it's going well. Just taking a look at some of these games. But thank you for asking, Matt Yop. So yeah, so rook F7 will, pawn takes F3, pawn takes F3, rook H7 leads to a symmetrically open king sides. Here, you know, it's not really that discernible that your king safety is worse. I think that's what it really is. I think basically this this pawn moving to E3 has this pawn moving to E3 has value in its you know, being a connected pass pawn. But rook F7 and but basically opening the king side and then challenging the queen on the H file has more value than the connected pass pawn here. You're probably going to get a connected pass pawn at some point. This C3 pawn looks like a really vulnerable target for attack. So making the king safeties equal is actually, you know, something that's of a lot of value to white, or sorry, a lot of value to black. This general idea. Making it so it's not so clear which side has the more exposed king is a strategy that I think is good for black in this situation. So here pawn takes F3 is an improvement on E3. G4 is really not a good idea. I think there's a few different issues here. But the most direct one I think is going to be rook H8, bishop takes, queen takes, queen takes. I mean, this isn't the cleanest line probably, but this threat on F3 is just going to be really rough for white to play against. You know, the only thing, you know, basically the only move I see here even is king to G2, and then black can respond to that quickly with rook to H4. This is a really bad idea. Opening this king side and making the king sides equally open, especially with this this fianchettoed light squared bishop, this really weakens the king side. So cool. Pawn takes g3, rook takes, and yeah, I think basically black is pretty solid here. Should be a win. Yeah, cool. Here, knight d7 over, definitely pawn takes e4 is objectively the best move. Play that on move 4, or move 3. It's just objectively better. That pawn is hanging. Second idea, I think you play all this reasonably. b4 was just kind of a not so great idea. It allows for this rook on this semi-open file facing this this backward pawn. So positionally, that's not a good plan. And then f5 weakened the king side. So basically allowing bishop e5 with f5 was not the correct positional thought. Something like king g6, rook h8, and exploiting the openness of this h file, so that black is basically the more aggressive side on the king side, is a good idea. f5 is responded to by bishop e5, which is weaker. f3 was, I don't know, I don't particularly like f3. I mean, I don't think there's any way that white can really, I think it's going to be very difficult for white to get in on the king side here. The king safety for black is deceptively good. And then pawn takes f3 opens up white's king side further. Now I think, I mean, I don't know. It's very unclear to me which side has better king safety. It might be black. Opening this up for white was just not a good plan. And pawn takes f3, exploits it. g4 is played anyways, which leads to exactly the same issues. Black would be really hoping for g4. It basically has a lot of the benefits to black of pawn takes f3 line. But here, yeah, I think basically you're good as black, and this is gonna turn out in a solid situation. Basically this traded off well. White sort of dismantled his own kingside safety, and black was able to exploit it. Good stuff. E3 followed by, yeah, g4 is just an error. The most direct way, the one that the engine suggests, is to exert pressure on the h file, rook h8, and even sack the full exchange. But however, this turns out in a good position. Yeah, thank you very much, Kathleen. Very interesting game. The biggest takeaway, I think, is just, this, I mean, this pawn takes e4 is just objectively okay to take. So if this ever gets played against you, I strongly recommend pawn takes e4. There's almost a 2-pawn difference between pawn takes e4 and any other move for black here. So in the case where the Caro-Kann happens and knight f3 is played instead of knight c3, just take the pawn, and you're in a good position as black. Thank you very much for sending the game, Kathleen. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much for helping with the stream. Okay. Awesome. Cool. And now we're on to KHMTF's game. I don't think we've looked at this one, right? So I just wanted to take a look at it. Okay, cool. KHMTF facing off against an early queen f3. So queen f3 is an interesting move. These are the types of moves. I played these types of games. Sorry about this. Sorry, I think I may have inverted the order between Kathleen's and KHMTF's, but they're both right now. But yeah, thank you very much for sending Kathleen, and yeah, I hope that's helpful. But no, in this particular case, you could just take e4. But yeah, I understand the logic on that thinking, Kathleen, for sure. Definitely, those traps on they're trappy openings sort of go away after about expert level. There just aren't enough traps that are not refuted to be playing them as an expert level player. So I often find that I don't know all the traps that are playable. It's sort of actually really good for me to go back and look at a lot of these games, because there are some traps that are played that I just sort of haven't played it against in many years and don't remember. But yeah, in that particular case, the pawn was just hanging. Anyways, let's think about this opening. Up until I was about 1200, I played this opening as white. I used to play e4, e5, queen f3. It offers great practical compensation, actually. I used to offer, basically I used to play bishop f4 in the next move, and then queen b3, and sometimes, my opponents would hang either f7 or b7, or I'd be able to fork them, like, in this situation, d6, bishop c4, knight f6, knight to e2, bishop c7, queen to b3, and this would actually play out super well for white. I would really like this position, especially if they didn't see d5. But this would actually I used to play this trap as white up until I was about 1200. The problem with these types of openings is that they're not that good against players who don't who kind of understand the general concepts. Here you can play like knight f6, you can play knight to c6, and just very standard developing moves, and you'll be okay. I would recommend knight f6 here. But basically, the issue with a move like this, big picture, is that it disrupts white's development. This knight to f3. Gotta study those tactics, Kiro. It's tactics. Tactics. If you're up 5.3 with tactical precision, you will be in very good place. That's where I think you'll see the fastest return on your study. But yeah, so here, knight f6 I think is pretty much, yes, there's a reason why that's the only, why the only emote we have so far is that tactics. It's very important. It will really help you improve, and I think relatively quickly. So knight f6, and normal developing moves refute moves like queen f3. Queen f3 is a move that offers practical compensation, but it runs into issues with development. You've taken away the natural square for the knight on f3, so now the kingside knight doesn't really have a good have a good plan for what it should do later in this opening. With this f3 being blocked, the knight will probably have to develop to f2. This will have to come after the bishop develops, and the whole order of way that things have, generally lead to a kingside castling here has been disrupted. That's why this idea tends to be not that good for white. So straightforward developing moves are the refutation of early queen moves. You need to be careful. You need to make sure that the white doesn't get practical compensation, or as little practical compensation as possible. You need to be very careful. But here, this just isn't that good for white. D5. So H6 is a missed win. Let's look at this D5 idea. D5. E takes D5. E4. Queen G3. Bishop d6, queen e3. I mean, this is looking bad for white, but I want to see where the actual break is. The break basically comes here. If the bishop, okay, so b3 is the best move for white. If the bishop goes to like e2, I think you can just play either rook e8 and have just huge pressure on the e file. I'm wondering about knight takes d5. How does that look? Queen takes e4, knight to f4 with the defense of this discovered win against the queen. This gets really, really ugly. It's just basically this this threat is, basically this queen is displaced on f3 now. This attack is cool. It's very early for it and this type of thing. But I think things like, d5 opening the position and quickening black's development can be very helpful. That's what the engine recommends. I think that'll probably work. But I'm trying to think of a more thematic reason why that's good. This is not what was played in the game. So h6, d3, and basically expansion, on the, basically expansion is good. This ends up trading off into equality, but equality is generally good for black. There's some missed tactical opportunities leading to this equality. In this case, d6 was somewhat inefficient. I think d5, a quick d5 here is enough to really disrupt the center. because you have e4 available. D5 paired with e4. That's what the thought is here. I think this is probably pretty good. This queen is just going to get stuck somewhere, and black's going to be able to play moves like knight e4. Black has complete control of the center, and the d5 pawn's going to get recaptured by that knight pretty soon. So overall, this is really dangerous for white. Black's gotten much quicker and more complete development, and the queen's going to end up being a liability at whatever center place it ends up in. It's possibly to the point where it gets so bad that black can win the queen for a couple pieces. So yeah, too early for this for white. White needs a more complete development. Ideas like h3 and g4 pawn storms, they can be great in the Italian game, but they come after white's development is more complete with moves like knight c3, knight f3, d3. This is just too early. White's not going to have enough pieces to make this happen successfully. Okay, so this actually, so allowing g5 was also, I guess another thing about h6 is it doesn't really effectively defend anything off of the f6 off of this diagonal. So h6 and g5 gets played anyways, basically. I don't think, maybe it's not playable immediately. It's playable after d3. But h6 doesn't really stop white on the king side. So I would steer away actually from moves like h6. If anything, it sort of provides a hook for white. White can play g5 and attack both h6 and f6. So for that reason, I think h6 is an overrated move in a lot of black positions against pawn storms. It basically doesn't help your king safety. The tactical refutation was d5, pawn takes d5, d4, the queen goes somewhere, and then like knight e4, or if on queen g3, I guess it's bishop to d6. Yep, continuing to threaten the queen and move things forward. Then you get the outpost on e5. I'm looking to see if there's other tactical refutations or whether d5 is forced, but h6 is actually, I think h6 is a counterproductive move. You're giving your opponent a hook to attack you with. I just wouldn't play that. H6 is not an effective defensive move against a kingside pawn storm. That is often true. So I would say really make sure whether h6 helps. Really make sure h6 helps your kingside versus potentially making your kingside more vulnerable. It's counterintuitive, I know, because it looks like g5 is a play for white. G5 is a move to be prevented for white. But let's just play like an underwhelming regular move like d6. On g5, the knight just plays to d7, and from a perspective, black is actually like a pawn better than he was with h6 there. H6 creates a hook for black. So I wouldn't play it. I think that's that's a general strategic improvement in response to kingside attacks with the pawn. Anyways, yeah, I hope that's somewhat helpful. But yeah, prevent that h6, pawn takes g5, and I think everything's sort of good here. Pawn takes f6, sure. Now we're in relative equality. But yeah, h6 was not the move here. I think it doesn't serve a purpose really, and sort of it's almost counterproductive. So just in terms of position, in terms of conceptual takeaways, I think your development in this opening was great. I think this quick development is definitely the way to go against an early queen move like that. But yeah, I would definitely aim for ideas like knight e8 and continue your quick development. So yeah, positionally h6 not as good a move, not as good a defensive move as it might first appear. Cool. Bishop e6, h4, all this trades off, and after everything trades off, it's a relatively equal position. Black's pawn structure is worse, but white's pawn structure isn't great either. Looks like 3 pawn islands for white, 2 isolated pawns. Black has a bishop. It's about equal. to be honest. This is a sort of equalish position. It's really going to just come down to playing chess here. This is now very equal. I think knight can play knight e7, knight to d5. Everything's looking fine. I don't know if trading off the knights was best. Trading off the knights sort of steers towards a draw. You are trading off minor pieces, and there is a more pronounced advantage of a bishop against a knight than a knight and a bishop against two knights, but I don't know. Your winning chances go down the more you trade off pieces here in an equalish endgame. Now white is sort of playing aggressively. He's being a little bit reckless here, and black sort of takes an advantage. Tricky endgame play. Fixing this pawn on c5, I think, should be good for black. But basically moving the king over and getting the king up through this route is black's objectively best option. I think you should be able to win that pawn, or I was thinking you should be able to win that c pawn. Even here though, this looks like a draw, or this looks like a win. Are you talking to me, Matt Yop, or are you talking to Tarash? Yeah. No, I think you're good here. I would just sort of maneuver the king over to the f6, g6. Yeah, sure. Where do I live? I live in the United States, in New York City. Yeah, no, sorry, I didn't know if you were asking me or not, Matt Yacht. But yeah. So yeah, in general, I think black is won here. So good game, well played by black. I think just close this out with king f6, king g5. Be ready to sack your bishop, but you're fine. You should win this. Anyways, yeah, no, thanks. Sorry, I didn't realize you were asking me, Matt Yop, but I live in New York City in the United States. So improvements for black. The improvements for black, I think, basically here are things like I think the main error here was playing h6. h6 is often counterproductive, provides a new route of attack for white. It's not always a bad move. It can be a good move if the white's pawns are less advanced here. Like here, I think it's probably more okay. If you compare it with g5, sometimes it can help to be a blockade on the king side, but in general, h6 is a very overrated move in kingside, in basically kingside defensive play. It just it often doesn't help, and it can run into issues with white's g pawn, allowing white to attack effectively. Bishop e6, cool. Everything trades off relatively equally. And overall here, I think. Yeah, black just sort of walks into a good position. Yeah, thanks FIFA boy. My main goal is just to do lessons for free and to make chess material free, but it's always nice to see that people are around too. The bigger goal is about lessons. I want to make sure that chess instruction material is always free and is free to everyone. So viewers are cool, but it's mostly about the teaching. Thank you for that though. Thank you for the encouragement though, FIFA boy, for sure. So yeah, h6 I think is the white's sort of biggest weakness in the game. The general plan was good. Quick development against queen f3, exactly how you're supposed to do it. Good stuff. There was a tactical win with d5 here, where you played d5. Or sorry, even a move before this. d5 and then e4 and start chasing the queen around while advancing your pieces to even more aggressive placements. That was the opportunity. Other than that, I think really very good game for black. You basically navigate out of this, trade into equality, and then win out of an equal endgame. This makes sense. Yeah, good stuff. I think trading off the knights made things a little bit more drawish, but probably should be a draw anyways, so But great win out of this. This is awesome. Getting that knight, good stuff. Thanks for sending the game, KHM. The one thing that I would review is, yes, that is correct, Matt. Yeah, it is 11:20 a.m. at this moment where I am located. But yeah, so that's my take on that. Very good game, KHM. The one thing worth revisiting from a strategic perspective is how vulnerable h6 and how effective that is as a defensive move against a kingside pawn storm. And then on the other side, I guess I would say, yeah, I mean, you know, d5 was a very difficult tactic to see, to be honest. You know, it was sort of indistinct, but you know, you're a very sort of a speculative tactic, but that was an improvement. Other than that, excellent game. I think you really got good chances there, and you know, and you got a win, a well-deserved win. Or sorry, I guess I mean you played into a well-deserved winning position. Thank you very much for the game, KHM. Thank you very much for being helpful and for supporting the chat. Welcome, Electric Horse. How are you? How's it going? Yeah, and also, Matt Yop, don't worry. You know, I hope that this live stream is convenient. But the video on demand will be available for 2 weeks after on Twitch, and then indefinitely. All these lessons, by the way, I'm just gonna say because everyone's here and because it's a good opportunity with everyone here. If anyone wants to, if anyone ever wants to watch lessons that are more than 2 weeks old, I have this YouTube channel now. This is where I will keep all lessons forever, hopefully. I can't see why they would be taken down. But every lesson I ever do is from now on is going to be on this YouTube channel, and recorded and available for, you know, hopefully for as long as YouTube is around. So I hope that's helpful. Feel free to subscribe or not subscribe or just watch the videos. Do whatever you want with it. But any lesson that you ever miss and you would like to see is going to be available on that YouTube channel from now on. So that was an advancement that I made yesterday. I felt good because it took me a second to figure out how exactly to do that. But now it's all on YouTube forever. So I hope that helps. I think with chat. I can't remember, but I think it should be with chat. Anyways, good game. Thank you very much for sending it, KHM, and yeah, I really appreciate you being here and for sending material to work off of for the stream. Super helpful. Everybody keep sending games. It's really awesome. It's great to be able to plan ahead because I can do better, you know, kind of analysis if I know what games go with which games, and sometimes pair them with some opening strategy maybe. But yeah, thanks. I really hope that's all helpful. Thank you guys. So yeah, so this should be good. Awesome. So this is a okay, this is a Lee chess game. And I will post this. Okay, all right, it's imported. And awesome. Cool. All right, very accurate game for white. I want to make sure I know who's playing this. So this is a game of I think we're taking this from Black's perspective. It was Eric's game, Psych Attack versus Eric. Cool. No, definitely send in all the games. So everyone send in all the games you want, and I'll just put it on the schedule. Thanks very much for that. Cool. Yeah, very solid game. Looks like a very good game for white. Interesting. But, you know, this is a King's Gambit. King's Gambit often has very accurate play. I haven't looked at this game. Yeah, so this is wild and a blowout win for white. Yeah, so this is, you know, this is a situation where a very high accuracy makes a lot of sense, actually. Okay. So, King's Gambit is an old school opening. Very classical. You know, people have tried to refute it. I don't think there's an official refutation, but I think that Black can secure pretty good positions. When I play against the King's Gambit, I play with a very early d5. This basically, you know, one of the things that Black castles on Yeah, sure. If you guys can just post the link in the Discord, that's probably the easiest way to do it. But I'll put it right. Yeah, I'll put it right on the list for games to look at. Anyways, yeah, no worries. No problem at all. But yeah, just feel free to post the game on the Discord and we'll look at it. 100%. Yes. Sorry. Yeah, you're talking to Tarash. My bad. Um, okay, cool. Yeah. So D5. D5 is how I respond to the King's Gambit. If you do an early D5, you're going to be in a good place. And the best defense against the King's Gambit, I think it's, I think there are, the King's Gambit. There's many books that take a look at the King's Gambit and many different ways that you can face it. I try not to get too stuck on any particular refutation. I just know that D5 from a fundamental perspective opens up your pieces so that they can develop quickly. Faster development of pieces is one of White's biggest advantages in the King's Gambit, and one of the things that can get dangerous for Black. If you play D5 early, you can tend to be able to make it okay. I mean, you can play an immediate D5 as well. I usually accept the Gambit on F4 and play D5. But there's many ways to refute it. Lots of different effective defenses. It's just important to keep very careful, be very cautious. But you will get good wins against the King's Gambit with things like pawn takes F4 and D5. Anyways, should be good. Pawn takes F4, knight F3, bishop E7. All right, Black is in good shape. In terms of the opening theory here, I don't know it super well. Knight F6 looks fine. I would play D5 probably, but knight F6 is what's played here. E5, knight G4, castles, C6. This is a fairly late playing of the freeing move D5. So in this line, I think Black has slightly better chances. It's pretty close to E. White will certainly get back the F4 pawn, but overall, the really scary attacks are not really here. Queen E2, knight E7, or bishop E7, and I think Black is pretty good. So, anyways, good stuff. Let's just go through the game. So basically, this gets really out of control for Black. Pawn takes H2. I mean, I don't know what this is called. The Burton Gambit. Okay. Have not played against this or played it. But we're still actually within recognized theory. And here's where White gets a huge advantage. Bishop to E7. So apparently bishop to E7 is not one of the playable moves here. Playable moves probably involve making the king safety better. D5, I think, probably leaves Black in a better position. Bishop F6, blocking off the F file, that makes sense to me at least. E5, not super sure what happens. D5, I guess, is the response, but bishop E7 is the move here that's unplayable. This shows that in this particular Burton Gambit, which I don't know, basically this ends up being good for Black. Good for White. It's just a misstep. It's a misstep in a book opening. I don't play this opening in such a book specific way. I just generally play D5 and know that my king safety is going to be better than if I played D5. It's very hard to go wrong with D5 in the King's Gambit. Even very hard to go wrong with D5 after pawn takes F4 in the King's Gambit. You can just give away the D pawn and your king safety will be better and everything's going to be good. But yeah, Black's good here. Pawn takes H2, and then bishop E7 is the misstep. Bishop sacks, knight goes there, queen goes there. And even here, White is showing a mate in 10. Really very quick, vicious attack. Nothing that White can do, or nothing that Black can do. Just killing. Usually not. G5. There are many positions in which you can. There's book lines where you play G5 and hold on to the F4 pawn as long as possible. But really, you have a better, position here. I like the D5 counter gambit. whether or not to hold on to f4 really just depends on what line you have memorized. I do not hold on to the g4 or the f4 pawn really. If it's a really obvious situation, I probably will. But as a general principle, I give up the d pawn and give up the f pawn, and then get quick development and good king safety relative to most positions in the king's gambit. That's my strategy for it. But yeah, I'm gonna play through this miniature again because it's crazy how dangerous this got for black, and how quickly. It goes from basically an equal position to a maiden. It goes from minus 0.5 on move 7 to mate and 10 on move 10. So in three moves, it just basically is a done game. And all related to this bishop e7 move. This bishop e7 swings the eval about 5 points. Yeah, Falkbeer counter gambit. I think Falkbeer counter gambit, and yeah, that's a line. I mean, I used to look at g5 lines and play into stuff like the Museo, but at the end of the day, I'm just like, it's there's a lot of theory there, and theory heavy game. Playing a King's black side of a King's Gambit against a well-booked theory player is just kind of a nightmare. So I just play d5. It's a very rough, fundamentally correct way to deal with the opening, and black will have to actually play me, a game. I generally figure when I play, if I actually get to the situation where I have to play chess is what they call it, but basically grandmasters say play chess. If I play into a situation which we're out of book and you have to play chess, I figure I have the advantage in that. So playing against a well-booked King's Gambit player is just something I don't want to do. I just sidestep it with an early d5 and play fundamentally as possible. Maybe I hold on to the f4 pawn with bishop d6, but I don't know. I just aim to equalize quickly in development and assume I'm happy to give my opponent the win on, yes, he knows that theory better than me. But I'll just my strategy is just turn it into a game where both of us are out of book, and especially someone who's entrenched in kind of opening traps, opening theory will generally be at a disadvantage. That's my strategy. Just get it to a tactical position and outplay your opponent. So yeah, so bishop e7 is a move that missteps. I just want to show the Museo Gambit and then I want to move on. Awesome miniature. Thank you very much for sending it. Cool stuff. The Museo is kind of a cool one. It goes knight f3, g5, bishop c4, g4, castles, and then this full f3 pawn or f3 knights get sacrificed. It's a minus 0.66, but tons and tons of practical compensation for white here. Bishop f6, bishop h6, queen f6 are both playable. I think I play bishop h6, but it's been a long time since I played g5 so early. I can just play an early d5 and really not worry too much about the theory. Just sort of whatever. Yeah, they're all book moves. Classical chess developed all of this like crazy. So like on this situation, there's still 4 moves. Actually no, sorry. There's 9 games with this situation. Bishop e7 is killing. You can see white has 100% win percentage. Knight h6 has 100% win percentage. This is extremely dangerous. And just because, you need to know these lines, and odds are if your opponent's playing the King's Gambit, they probably know it better than you. I've just steered clear of these lines. Played d5 and try to steer it towards a fundamental chess game. Makes the most sense to me. Why bother, right? It's just get your tactics good, get your positional strategy good, and then steer clear of all the trappy lines. It's, if you can force your opponent, if you're confident you can play chess better than your opponent, get to a situation where you can play chess and you're in good place. These trappy lines actually go away too. It's been years since I've seen the King's Gambit in a game. King's Gambit is played mostly, at class level, club level. Anyways, let's go on to the next one. The last game here. Take a look at this. I've forgotten who this is. Oh, it's RV Phil's game, who I know is here or was here earlier. Thank you very much for waiting, and let's get started on it. Cool. Awesome. Early London system, cool. London system is an extremely solid opening for white. It's when you ask a computer to play a chess opening as white, it's usually the London. London, I think, is one of the best openings as determined by computer analysis at this point. Good development, good initiative. Knight, I think, can play to e5 here. But overall, this is just really, really solid. I mean, it's basically white playing the semi-Slav structure, like black semi-Slav structure, with no bad bishops. So really just a generally awesome position. On e takes d4, I certainly disagree with that. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I don't want to get onto my soapbox, but I don't think that's supported by any kind of reasonable thing. I think you want to play the most solid openings you can at every level, and strengthen your skills at every level. I don't understand that if that's true, I definitely don't understand that claim. Just play something. I'm an e4 player, so I don't have any predisposition towards the London system. But I can just say that the London system is objectively probably the best opening. Probably, if not the best opening, one of the best openings. It's determined by computer analysis to be one of the most solid openings. So things that deviate from that, yeah, because it's good. It's a good opening. I mean, I play e4 just because I like the games out of e4. But I think engine analysis is going to end up pointing towards the London system as one of the best openings. That's why Magnus plays it. That's why Grandmasters play it. I can't see anything bad happening to you from playing the best moves. I'll try not to get into the specifics of why that claim is being made, but okay. Anyways, very solid opening. Engine loves it, and Magnus Carlsen loves it. I think it's a great idea, great way to play. Cool. Bishop to d3, pawn takes d4, pawn takes d4. White's pawn structure is still extremely solid. Launching an attack on the king side here, and I think you're in a good place. Knight e5, bishop takes, pawn takes. Awesome. I would leave the pawn structure as is. I think pawn. I'm really surprised that the engine likes pawn takes e5. Making this pawn structure not continuous seems worse to me, but how's bishop takes e5 here? I mean, I would go all the way to this, to be honest. But pawn takes e5, I guess, is better. Pawn takes e5 is interesting. I'm a little surprised that the engine assesses this as a good idea. I guess it does force this knight off of its most healthy squares for the rest of the game. It forces the knight to d7 or to g8 or to h7. So I guess pawn takes e5 makes sense. It does eliminate this pawn structure, which I was really liking. But it can be supported with f4. But I think the main value of pawn takes e5 is the ability to follow up with knight to d. Is the ability that it requires a follow up with knight to d7, displacing this knight, removing it from its natural f6 square. I think you can then play f4 super comfortably and maintain a good central control. That's great, Topo. Yeah, great to hear. I think basically that's awesome, Topo, and I'm really happy to hear it. I think tactics below expert level are just the way to do it. I think you will have to go back and help your positional and opening understanding at a later point. But if you want your quickest return on time, definitely I would say tactics. Tactical study, an hour or two a day, or however much time you can allocate to it for a month or for however long you want to do it. That will really help. So I strongly recommend doing that. You'll have to circle back and understand more positional concepts, more opening concepts at a later point. But the main differentiator at club level is absolutely tactics. So if you stick with consistent and sufficient tactical study, it's really going to help you, I think. So that's my thinking on that, Topo. I'm really happy that you're headed in the right direction. I think if you keep at it, you will improve. You will absolutely improve. I don't know how quickly, but you will improve and you'll feel more confident playing. So yeah, great work, Topo. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. It always makes me feel happier to hear that. So really good work. But yeah. So anyways, creating this non-continuous pawn structure. Pawn takes e5, knight d7, and then f4. This leaves white with a solid pawn structure. So I guess that's the reasoning. Basically, creating this trading this pawn structure for this pawn structure, and moving the knight to a less natural square is a good trade overall for white. That's the logic in why pawn takes e5 is good there. I still sort of, I mean, it doesn't look right to me from a fundamental perspective, but that's the trade that the engine is assessing as being good for white versus black. No, I think, I don't know. I can't promise anything, but I know that if you continue on with the tactical study that you're doing, Topo player, I think that's going to move you absolutely in the right direction. I don't know, but yeah, consistent tactical study will help you. It's objectively true thing. So I recommend a lot of that until you reach 2000. So yeah, so basically white, white can seize and hold a lead with f4 castles. This was risky. Trading off the queen here, I think, was not an awesome idea. I think basically here, f4 solidifying the king side, or solidifying this e5 pawn. One of the reasons why I had, skepticism about the e5 pawn is because this pawn is isolated here, and I think that gets worse if you don't support it with f4. F4, and you have a continuous pawn structure, relatively difficult for black to attack. With queen to h5, now not only did you not protect the e5 pawn, now you can't really play f4 with the same type of strength. So I think this, to this point, I think everything's sort of been fundamentally correct for white. Even including pawn takes e5, which I was nervous about playing. I think that was, that was shown to be objectively the best move. But it needs to be followed up with this defensive move, f4. There are other moves. f4 is one of several moves white can play here. But this defensive pawn structure is going to be needed to hold this e5 pawn. You've switched a connected pawn structure to an unconnected pawn structure, and it's important to turn it back into a connected pawn structure with f4. Anyways, I would basically keep pushing on the black king side here. Looks like it's about equal. No, I think it's okay. I think that's a good question for sure. But I think because the main piece that black would attack you with after castling kingside would be the dark squared bishop, and the dark squared bishop's already been traded off. This diagonal is not actually that dangerous to you. Black could play something along the lines of queen b6, but then you can just match it with bishop to f2 and castle, and white is good here. So yeah, so queen b6. Yep. It's definitely worth paying attention to threats from queen b6. But after f4, this diagonal is not super strong for the bishop anyways. I mean, basically the bishop is doing a pawn's job. So, you wouldn't want to... Yeah, no, it's a really good question, though, Electric. And I do think that you need to, be careful when playing, moves that weaken your king side, which this definitely does. I mean, this definitely opens lines on your king post-castling that you wouldn't have been opened either, previously. So I would say queen b6, bishop f2, castles, and you're good. But... yeah, overall, this bishop is no longer the right piece to be on this diagonal. So yeah, bishop f2, castles, and white is in a pretty good place. But white can respond tactically to queen b6 with bishop f2. This bishop's going to be, just from a conceptual perspective. This bishop should, if you see a bishop in a situation like this, supporting pawns when a pawn could be moved there, this bishop should just not be on this diagonal. A pawn is a more efficient way to deal with the strengths in that position. So bishop f2, g3, you're in a good place. But good question, Electric. Thank you very much for asking it. I do think people you often can't play moves like f5 super cavalierly because they do weaken your kingside pawn structure. This particular case, I think you're okay. Good question though. Yeah, and everyone, feel free to ask questions if you have questions. Like, I'm super happy to answer them and take a minute to to ask them because. I can't promise my answer will always be the right one, and I would look to grandmasters over my judgment. Feel free to ask questions. Is my point. I'll try to answer them correctly if I can, I'll give my best answer. I promise. Yeah. So, anyways, f4, rook takes, and this. Yeah, overall here, White's got a position where he's playing chess. This rook d1 and then threats on d5, I think could really be dangerous to black. This d5 pawn is kind of a yeah, but there's a big world. I mean, I put some time in, but at the same time, Grandmaster is very objectively better than me. So chess is one of these things. You know very objectively how good everyone is relative to everyone else. And a Grandmaster has just put in more time and more effort, than I have, and or is more talented, which is also absolutely possible and probable. But yeah, it's all relative. Chess is one of the very few things in life where you can just look and say, okay, this person is just, stronger than this person. There's very few things that are like that, to be honest. But chess is freeing in the sense that you have a rating system. The rating system is generally pretty good, and you know that a 2400 is just stronger than a 2200, or a 2600 is stronger than a 2250. It's very, very objective. So I'll give the best answers I can, but if a 2600 offers free lessons, which is my hope long term, that you should listen to that person over me for sure. Anyways, this yeah. Hey, thank you very much for the follow, Leaf. Appreciate it. Yeah. So here. Positions, it's a position where you have the opportunity to really just sort of play chess. It's just a late middle game position, an interesting one. Putting the bishop on d4 makes a lot of sense. Putting pressure on this d5 pawn, this backward pawn on an open file makes a lot of sense. I'm wondering here, maybe like rook d1. With rook d1, you actually start getting some threats of like, and this knight is pinned too, which is dangerous for black. With rook d1, I think you're going to start having rook takes e4 threats on this, basically this pinned pawn on d5. But overall, when assessing this position, the important things are white has a bishop pair, which is good. This d5 pawn is on backwards and on an open file, which is good for white. And white has a bishop pair. So, anyways, generally a good position for white. There's a reason why white is up about 0.8. I think bishop takes c6 is not. I think you really you're trading into the late middle game, early end game with a bishop pair in a relatively open position. I think you should keep this bishop on the board. Maybe bishop d1 is the way to go. Yeah. So I think bishop takes c6 is not the right plan. I think bishop d1 is the right plan. Maybe you also can play bishop d4 as long as the bishop is pinning on a4. You can just keep the bishop on this diagonal. There's no real reason why you can't. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I can add a lesson for the Grunfeld. I can always do more Grunfeld. I play the Grunfeld a lot, so... how about this? How about we make the Grunfeld 6:05 p.m. Eastern on May 9th? and I'll start off the lesson on 6:05 p.m. Eastern, May 9th for the Grunfeld. But yeah, thanks for the recommendation, Random. It's added to the schedule. I like that idea. Yep. Yeah, no, I understand. That bishop takes c6 does make d4 a little more playable. For the moment, sorry, I have to be a little careful with this. So the rook has to move, and then rook c8. Here, I think you can play bishop to d4. I think you can play bishop to d4. You know, this knight is pinned, so so bishop to d4 is playable with the bishop still on this diagonal. Yeah. So bishop d4, threats on h8, and I think white's in a pretty good place. So yeah, so I would steer away from this trade. I think that's I think you've got the pin, and the pin has value to white, and trading off the bishop pair going into the endgame is not so awesome for white. This looks like, I mean, this might be the best way out at this point, but yeah, rook h5, okay, bishop to g5. Oh, okay, yeah. So there's a tactical improvement here. I was just wondering, how basically, so the first thing is, this rook's mobility got pretty limited. I still think white's fine, but somehow this rook has gotten a bit displaced over here. I think the rook sort of needs a covering move like g4 so that it can play h3 maybe. But this, yeah, rook h6. This is once this rook has gotten itself kind of stuck on this h file. Rook h5 is actually a tactical improvement. Here you can play king g6 and then rook h8, and then there's some response for black, but this should be enough to get this this rook out of this problem. King g7, rook e8 maybe. Yeah. Or even the engine is suggesting rook takes, bishop takes, and then king takes and rook h6 and white wins. Rook takes and rook takes bishop, and it's about a draw, about equal. So that was a little bit of an endgame tactic. But let's just go through this game, or go through beginning to end, because I think London system's great. And pawn takes d4. Pawn takes was surprisingly good. It dislocates the knight. But the follow-up move is f4. You want the pawns to still be connected, and this e5 to be defended by a pawn as opposed to pieces. And f4 is an opportunity to do that. This strategy made it so that f4 wasn't possible, and then basically white was basically having some issues here. Or, basically white was a little bit worse, even with the bishop pair. But the right idea instead of this queen move was the queen's not the right piece to defend this pawn with, and it doesn't defend any better from h5 than it does from e2. f4 instead. Connected pawns, e5 pawn is safe. You're in a good place. Knight takes, f4, rook takes, and yeah, it's a complicated position. You're basically just playing chess against black, late middle game strategy. Weakness on d5, bishop pair versus bishop and knight, so that's advantageous to white, and overall interesting. Here, bishop to d4 was a tactical possibility. The only response to this that black really has is f6. Basically f6 and knight takes d4. Knight takes d4, losing the whole exchange, are evaluated as about equal. So white's a little bit better here, and this pin is very valuable. So bishop d4 and not bishop takes c6 here. Sorry about that. So bishop d4 and not bishop takes c6. You can do the bishop d4 pin, this great tactic, with the knight still on, because on knight takes, bishop takes rook. And you're good. This rook, so now it's basically equal, with bishop having taken c6. It's an opposite colored bishop endgame. And then this, yeah, this should be good for black. Yeah, so this ends up being a win for black. But the key pieces here. The key piece, pawn takes e5 was a great idea, but the follow-up needs to be f4 to keep your e5 pawn from getting isolated. That's the first takeaway. And then the second idea is really at this position here. Bishop d4 was a tactically playable improvement. Bishop takes d7 is the response to knight takes d4, and the only other move that can be played for black is f6. Bishop takes f6 is yeah, bishop takes f6 is I think a better idea. Bishop d4 and then threats on the rook file here. Okay, cool. And then yeah, this looks good. You know, this basically just played out reasonably. So the two improvements I have for you, RV Phil. You had you wanted to play f4 to keep the pawn structure continuous in the early middle game, and then the second one is you know, first keep the you know, the bishop pair on is one reason. And then there was just sort of a tactical improvement because bishop to d4 was still totally playable with the knight being able to take d4. I think bishop takes c6 was done with the idea of bishop to d4 in mind, but it didn't require giving up one of your big advantages, which is this bishop pair. Bishop to d4 basically requires black lose material, and then after that I think you're better. So overall, a super interesting game. Really, yeah, really an interesting one. And those are two pieces, but I think there's some more analysis that can be done. Yeah, but two big takeaways from that game. Thank you all very much for joining the stream. Thank you very much for being here and for sending your games. I hope it's helpful. It's really fun for me and really good opportunity for me to get to improve my game a bit. So yeah, thank you all very much for participating, and thank you all for being here. Thanks. Yeah, thanks a lot, guys. Have a good one. Alifia just asked a question. I'm a USCF master, a USCF life master. I'm usually somewhere between 2200 and 2250 USCF, and yeah, but good question. Good question, Alifia. I just wanted to make sure that we got to it. Yeah, thanks all for being here. I hope this analysis is somewhat helpful, and thank you very much for all being here and for sending your games and contributing. Awesome. Cool. Next stream is at 6:05 p.m. Eastern, and yeah, I really look forward to seeing you there. Thank you all for being here this morning, and have a good day. Thanks. Bye.